Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure this is the session you've been waiting for all afternoon. I know I have. So with that, let's get going. So we're going to be talking about stormwater resiliency and sustainability. And so with the intensity and frequency of 50 and 100-year storm events increasing, we're going to talk about how cities are planning for resilient and sustainable stormwater. Just a couple facts before we get going. So in 2020, there were 22 catastrophic weather and climate events which exceeded $1 billion in damage across the US. And research from the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration suggests that these events will only increase in frequency. So how we actually deal with stormwater in innovative ways is going to be critical as we get going forward. So my name is Brian King. I work for Advanced Drainage Systems. We make pipe. I could talk to you about plastic pipe all day, every day, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk to these folks on stage. And with that, we have a panel of four people who are involved in stormwater sustainability and resilient infrastructure. I have Eliza Jane Whitman, who is the Director of Public Works for the City of Carson, California. I have Rajani Nair, Deputy Director, Watershed Protection Division, Environmental Services Department, City of San Jose. It's a pretty long title you've got there. I've got Sergio Queves. He is the Division Chief of Maintenance at Caltrans. And I have Josette DeCaslo. He's the Environmental Compliance Sustainability Programs Manager at the City of Beverly Hills. Okay, so as a little icebreaker question, I'd like to ask each of you, starting on the end, when you think about sustainability and resiliency, what does that mean to you?
Is this on? Oh.
There we go.
For resiliency, it predominantly just means that we need to ensure that it can be retained and maintained, and it will always bounce back. So with sustainability, it comes down to maintenance. Just ensuring that it could, be providing the integrity that it is designed for. So for our communities overall. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
For me, it means that really we're kind of going back to nature-based solution in terms of stormwater management and flooding management. So if you're local to the LA region, we are just hardscape. You want to get the rainwater out as fast as we could. And now, so we're kind of redoing what was, artificial to more nature-based, so we could replenish our groundwater aquifers in here, and also, most importantly, help beautify the neighborhoods within our cities or within the county itself.
Fantastic, thank you.
To add to what my colleagues have stated, I'd also think about, for resiliency, making sure that we can get back to where we were functioning as a city prior, and making sure that we minimize any impact on the citizens, particularly as it relates to those that are compromised maybe health-wise or something else. City of Carson does have cooling centers. I think about, do we have enough power, emergency backup power, to be able to keep that cooling center in case the power goes down. There's so many different things to think about. So that's my 2 cents.
For me, when I think about resiliency, I think about adaptability. And how can we adapt our infrastructure to the ever-changing landscape of climate change, whether that be fires, flooding, sea level change. There's a lot there. And it's about hardening our systems to be more adaptable to those changes. So that's something that I'm constantly struggling for. We're talking a lot of dollars, a lot of effort to be able to have a resilient system, but it's very important that we do that because literally the ground is shifting under our feet. Sustainability, the old proverb, people, planet, prosperity. And it's not just about, making sure that things are being well maintained, but being well maintained in a green way so that our future generations can enjoy them. That's what those things mean to me.
Awesome. We're going to trade the microphone back and forth here. So you heard a lot about different meanings of resiliency and sustainability. And so with that, we're going to get in. I'm going to start with Eliza Jane. Eliza Jane, the City of Carson recently has installed active stormwater management systems in the Carriage Creek Park that pump stormwater into the sewer system. And unlike most passive solutions that ultimately just flow into the ocean, you're actually using stormwater in a beneficial project. Can you talk about that and the challenges that you faced when you put that project in place?
Absolutely. So we were really fortunate. we had actually a grant from Caltrans as well as from LA County Department of Public Works to put together this large $22 million project underneath one of our parks. And what's unique about it is it actually captures stormwaters during the wet weather events. Normally, a lot of these catch basin systems underground and under the parks only take dry weather. And the reason is because wastewater treatment plants can be disrupted if you have like a surge of chemicals or something that is going into the wastewater treatment plant. They have just historically said no to anything during wet weather. So we were very fortunate. We worked with the owner of the wastewater treatment plant in Carson, LA County sanitation districts, and with them, with a monitoring system and everything else, it was one of the first of its kind, largest of its kind, to actually take this wet weather. So it is a new approach that now we're finding other communities are actually doing, other places and wastewater treatment plants are actually willing to take stormwater during wet weather events. So it's a big shift. It's actually pretty exciting because now we can capture that much more stormwater and not just the dry weather.
That is pretty innovative. I mean, most, like I said, most stormwater solutions are passive solutions. So if you can't capture it when it's happening, and especially in an area like Southern California where, scarcity of water and the drought, using water when you capture it is pretty innovative solution. And with that, I'm going to ask Rajani down the end there. Given your role with both public and private projects, can you comment on how you balance between the different needs for hard infrastructure, systems, and nature when planning a resilient system?
Sure, thanks. And for those of you, I don't know how many of you are in Northern California, just a lay of the land. Oh, okay, hey, great. All right, hey. Okay. Just an overview of San Jose's demographics, or just the lay of the land. We have about 26 distinct rivers, and that is about 136 miles over a 180 square mile, which is about 30% the size of LA, just to give perspective. And unlike LA, we have actually trees, and we actually have life in our waterways. And for those of you who may not be very familiar with the stormwater, just the whole, infrastructure in itself, it is heavily permitted. So we are required by law to comply with the Clean Water Act under the EPA. And so we have to follow a permitting process in order to ensure that we preserve the water quality of whatever that's discharging through our system. So I would say through that, our development from a private sector standpoint has been in the past 10 years, this permit has been implemented since the 1990s. Our development, they're obligated, to comply and implement stormwater treatment systems on their premise. And I would say the public sector, we're a little delayed, but that's okay. I think it's complex. For those of you who are involved with water, it is probably the most fragmented system altogether, in various forms of utilities that are out there. And so, what's really important for us as we're moving forward, and especially with this huge infrastructure bill, it is exciting that stormwater is in there. And particularly the bridge, where we can really implement a lot of this natural habitat, is green stormwater infrastructure, which I'm hoping in many of your cities you are thinking about that more and more, because it is not only just from a water quality perspective, but it is also helping us with the climate challenges that we're going to be facing in the next decades or so, providing heat islands, particularly in our underserved communities, because those are a lot of the legacy areas that we really need to address. So with that, I think that's where we're not fully balanced, but more to come. So that's where I'm hoping.
Well, good. I'm going to pick up on one of the things you said, which was with public and private partnerships, it's people working together, but you also mentioned that it's working within the cities that neighbor you. And so this question is to Josette, because I know that it's important to consider the impact of infrastructure and water management projects within those areas around you. And I know recently you worked with Culver City, even though you're in Beverly Hills, you worked with Culver City on one of their projects to capture and reuse stormwater. Can you explain those best practices and how you work with neighboring communities to provide better solutions?
Sure, just like Rajani, right? Rajani said, like, as a city in the LA County, we're all regulated as well with our MS4 permit, our stormwater permit. And we're kind of grouped together by watersheds. And we're given a task to manage runoff. And with a built-out environment, especially in the West Los Angeles side, real estate is a premium, opportunity is a premium. So considering that our regulations and our requirements are done and implemented by a watershed, we were able to partner with the city of Culver City at a construction and shovel-ready project to go that would capture around 30 acre-feet of runoff. And the only thing that the city of Beverly Hills did was to help Culver City fund the project and not lose almost $8 million of grant funding from the state. So with the city's contribution to that, we got our stormwater compliance from our regulator. At the same time, we're helping the region, considering Culver City is closer to Bayona Creek, improve our water quality standards. So with that kind of partnership, we kind of set the standard and kind of bring this up to other regions and other watersheds, and hopefully there will be more and easier compliance credit options by the regulator, seeing the success between Beverly Hills and Culver City.
That's a great example of where working with your neighbors to look at funding and look at projects. And one of the things you mentioned was time and digging up existing infrastructure. And I'm going to throw this to you, Sergio, because you manage and maintain or oversee maintenance for Caltrans, and obviously improving or replacing infrastructure underneath the highway. Everybody knows all about that, and nobody really loves that. So can you talk about how the challenges that you face when you're looking at maintenance of existing infrastructure, while at the same time trying to improve performance and resiliency and not inconvenience people?
Yeah, that's a big challenge, and it's a great question. Well, I'll begin about what's causing the challenges. The first thing I'll say is our frequency and size of wildfires, even flooding events in some cases, are becoming more prevalent. You add to that just the sheer size of the infrastructure that we maintain in Caltrans. I mean, across the state, many of you may be familiar with this, but we manage over 50,000 lane miles, over 200,000 culverts. Our right-of-way is about 350,000 acres. So anything we do across the state, it's a major effort to maintain those facilities and make sure that we're being resilient and being thoughtful and looking ahead as to how we're going to provide for new policies and procedures to be as efficient as possible to help with, maximize the return on investment from the taxpayer. So what are we doing? Well, first of all, SB1 was really helpful in that regards. It really allowed us to address a lot of the backlog work that we had and be able to invest in our infrastructure and help maintain it in a better position. Another thing that I do want to mention is we also are looking at creating new programs. We're not being static. For example, within the maintenance program, we created a new principal position in a new subdivision within my program to address fuels management and if you call it wildfire management in high-risk fire areas. Because God knows that when those happen and you get scar areas and we get into the whole bear word teams, many of you may be familiar with that, because that's a tremendous impact in our water quality issues, let alone slides and slip outs and on hard damage to our infrastructure. So anyway, we've created a whole new subdivision that works with Forest Service, that works with CAL FIRE, that works with our local fire chiefs across the state to prioritize $30 million in funding that we set aside to help put out projects to reduce fuels across the state. That's just one example, let alone all the efforts that we've done up in the Tahoe area. So we're constantly looking at maximizing our funds, whether those be major maintenance funds. That's about 20 to 25 million a year that we use to preserve our culverts, our storm drain systems in good condition, as well as shop funding that we use for more robust replacement of older systems. At the end of the day, we have a large infrastructure and large assets across the state, just in quantity, that's been aging. It's been aging and needs to be replaced. And we now, as we're replacing them, we're looking at project-specific locations. Where are they? Do we need to account for sea level rise? Through the planning process, we look ahead and making sure that we're scoping the projects to be as resilient and cost-effective and as innovative as possible to make sure that what we're building out there has the longest lasting life that we can get.
Thank you very much. I notice we're all sitting forward in these chairs. These chairs look really, really good. By the way, they're kind of cool, but I'm not sure when you lean back if it's the right look. So I don't know. So I notice we're all perched forward on the chairs. So we've been talking a lot about funding and how we actually fund these projects. So I'm going to throw this question to Eliza Jane, because I know that you're in talks with LA County right now to form an enhanced infrastructure financing district, or IFTA, which incorporates private and public infrastructure monies. Can you discuss the projects and solutions that this type of funding mechanism will solve?
So that's actually not my department.
Oh, okay. Can you comment on that, or do you want me to throw something different to you?
Why don't you throw something different?
Okay, I'll throw something different at you. Let's talk about coming off the heels of the infrastructure bill. How do you think this will impact your region and the projects that you've actually got going on from an economic development perspective?
It's going to really benefit the citizens of Carson tremendously, because we're limited in our tax base, and there's only so many types of projects that we can do. People have talked about it previously. There's so much deferred maintenance in many of the cities and counties, and ours is no different. So we're looking at heat island effects. We're looking at tree trimming. We're looking at roads needing to be slurry sealed and completely redone. There's so many levels of infrastructure that we really need to have done. Stormwater is one of them, in addition to everything else. So when I look at the infrastructure bill and what needs to be done for the citizens just to have, infrastructure that's we often take for granted in many cities, this particular community, this is just going to be incredibly helpful. So we really feel fortunate that this is happening.
And a little bit of a follow-up to that, but how are you going to prioritize those different projects? You mentioned a variety of different things. I mean, obviously, everybody wants their thing done first. Stormwater being one of them, which to me is most important. But I mean, how do you prioritize that from a city perspective when you're looking at those projects?
Well, we have a task force where we're really looking at because we do have disadvantaged communities scattered throughout our city. We look at the equity issues. We look at, when's the last time in one particular neighborhood have they actually gotten, improved streets, or do they have any trees at all? What are some of the heat island issues that we have? Trying to, across the board, look at all the different issues that need to be addressed and do it in an equitable way. Obviously, there's certain parts of the city that have been taken care of, and they should have some improvements as well. But we do the best we can. We are also looking at broadband. We definitely have neighborhoods that have zero broadband, and so we've heard the same stories from folks that will say, oh yeah, they're just using their cell phones. They don't really want real broadband. So, but it is interesting because you do run across that, and at the City of Carson we actually have it pretty much everything.
Awesome. Well, I did one of these sessions at Infra Day in Houston, and I also did one in New York. Everybody has lots of competition because I think New York alone spent about $2.5 billion of the $1.2 billion bill. So there's lots of people looking for those funds out there.
And sorry, one more thing. Also, it's compliance.
Absolutely.
So we have to meet our compliance rules.
Absolutely, we do. Josette. While good stormwater management improves the quality of life, and we've talked a little bit about quality of life and the balance between hardscape versus using nature, when you're thinking about and considering different types of projects, beautification, natural vegetation, sustainability, native plants, beautification, how do you make sure that you're taking all those things into consideration when you're planning for your projects?
So for right now, what we're really doing is doing a lot of multi-benefit projects within the city of Beverly Hills. So just for example, with stormwater, We're currently under construction for the Burton Way, Green Street, and Water Efficient Landscape Project. So this is just pictures. It's a 4-island turf lawn median in the middle of the city of Beverly Hills. But now we're converting it to a 4 acre feet capacity bioswales on both sides that capture almost 211 acres of runoff during dry and wet weather season. Excess water that we collect from our bioswales will end up going to a 3 million gallon tank that will end up eventually irrigating the water efficient landscape that we're replacing our turf green. So that's just one example. And the other part of it is that we're also recharging our groundwater aquifer. So we're making ourselves sustainable for our groundwater resources, which is far and few in the city of Beverly Hills. So we want to be sustainable and resilient in our water demands. In terms of long-term planning, what we're doing is just to be more efficient is incorporating beautification, green streets, stormwater management, stormwater quality in every sidewalk project, in every alley repavement project. So we're really looking at those different options, and we're just going to march towards our stormwater compliance plan, even though the estimated tag price at $120 million. We always just want to take small steps at a time because the city believes in investing on its future. So that's how we're kind of managing this portion.
Thank you. Do you, from a citizen engagement perspective, what do you guys normally do as a best practice for engaging with the local residents?
So just like probably the city of LA, we have various commissions that, are appointed by city council. So it is called the Grand Show. We take the project to every single commission. We hold multiple events of community engagement. To a point of going to every HOA or city organization to promote a project. We get up and downs in participation, but at least we make sure, I would say, 2 years worth of community engagement to get a buy-in to it. And a city like Beverly Hills, some of those ticky-tack stuff got to be perfected. So that's really is the important portion of our community engagement. The community is really happy and supportive of all of these infrastructure projects.
Absolutely. Rajani, similar type of question, but when planning for green infrastructure, you talked about green infrastructure and stormwater, quality of life needs to be considered, and you heard Josette talk about quality of life and how they're working that into their projects. What are you guys doing around watershed protection and those types of solutions as you add amenities, but at the same time trying to protect? I know obviously up in the Bay Area, San Jose, there's a lot of coastline that you guys are looking to restore and protect. So how do you balance between those types of projects?
So what we're doing, this is still on. Okay. So what we're doing right now, as many of you are experiencing for those agencies, the pandemic really just, the real estate has just skyrocketed where it became so costly as to how we want to really address the targeted areas that we really need to. So preliminary, what we are working on is, reutilizing some of our park spaces that are underused and have that as a multi-benefit, as Sergio mentioned, with stormwater capacity for any kind of flooding use. But what we are adding in addition is the education component, also recreational, and educating people the importance of it, because it's really, I really liked how you said stormwater was number one. It is hard to sell that idea when you are in a drought environment, right? And it is really an underutilized utility overall. So, and it's, so it's really just bringing people out. And things that we learned in San Jose, after, the pandemic, which was always there, but it was more transparent, after, that, a good percentage of our community, really didn't have access to public space. And so, from a health benefit, giving access, that, really could improve the quality of life of individuals, those are really critical. And, we have a good portion of our community that is, underserved, and, making sure that, just again, talking about a little bit the environmental justice component of it, just ensuring that we have the space dedicated. And so green infrastructure really is providing such a positive benefit in improving those communities. And so, so we do have one regional project I don't know offhand. It's one of our partner departments that's leading it, but it is supposed to cover, I think, over 200 acres of stormwater benefit, and so it is the first of its kind for our county, which is going to help out with our stormwater permit requirements and so forth. So more to come. We are partnering with Caltrans and different agencies. So unlike, I don't know if this is a rumor, if LA owns everything. Bay Area, unfortunately, everyone has a piece of land. So for us, we have to coordinate with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps, our local water agencies. It's just the list is crazy to coordinate with. And so wherever we can partner, that could provide better benefit. Because now the focus is on our community, which always should be. But even with regards to the design and ensuring that it improves these quality of life where needed. So that's how we've been targeting this.
Yeah, and social equity is something that definitely a lot of cities are thinking about as well too. When you mentioned, it's hard to think about stormwater when it's not raining. But you can make the amenity that manages and handles stormwater to be something that a community can actually embrace and can actually get people out to. The LA River is a great example here as well too. I was talking to the Nature Conservancy just last week, and in LA, obviously with the LA River, it used to be a giant concrete channel. Now it's actually returning it back to nature, which helps. Not only it's nicer to look at, it's somewhere that you can actually go. It's better from a water quality perspective. It's got a lot of benefits to it, as opposed to how do I get the water from A to B as fast as possible and solve my problem. And so that's something that I think a lot of cities are looking at. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit when I talk to you, Sergio. You mentioned a lot about your budget and how you make your budget go as far as you can. So when you're looking at different solutions and maintaining and improving existing infrastructure, there's many, many products out there, many types of solutions. What do you do, and how do you balance the performance versus cost versus risk? And how do you manage that to make dollars go as far as you can?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that in the calculus that we do to manage that risk, one thing that we have to understand from the Caltrans perspective, and it goes back sort of to our size and just the criticality of sometimes our routes, the volumes of traffic that we have on our system are tremendous. And as such, we have to take that into account when we're looking at how we're going to maintain that and what kind of repair we're going to do there to make sure it doesn't close again. Every time we close, whether it be I-80 or if it's I-10 down here, you name it, you can understand that it's millions and millions of dollars in freight that's being stopped per hour. And so how do you quantify that risk? Well, what you do is obviously you can't throw endless money at everything. We all have a budget, right? So we balance by learning from our past mistakes with looking at that specific route and choosing the best engineered solution that's going to give us long-term performance. So we're a bigger organization, obviously, so we have like a new products committee that looks at new products coming in. On the pavement side, we have the Pavement and Materials Partnering Committee, where we look at how we can improve our pavement products to last longer. We're constantly trying to learn from other states, from industry, from other partners as to how we can do better in maintaining our facilities long-term. And part of balancing that is, we look into performance-based specifications, right? At the end of the day, instead of giving a cookie cutter or a recipe type of specification, we say, hey, this is what we want the end product to be. This is how much we want something to last. So based on that, we can minimize our risk to not get the product that we want. So for us, it's very important that we look at the best policies, products, and procedures across the nation, also with industry, and apply them as quickly as possible. For us, time is a big factor in reopening a facility, or more importantly, making sure that it doesn't close to begin with. So we could be looking at, for example, back to my example for wildfires. When we had burn scar areas, we pre-positioned maintenance forces. We look at pre-cleaning culverts to make sure that we minimize any debris that could clog those culverts. We look at, even now, a big, and this, I could be going off the beaten path here, so you can pull me in, Brian. but the point is, even, litter is a big issue. And we are, through Clean California, we are doing a tremendous amount of work in regards to reducing litter in our system, because ultimately that ends up on the roadside, ends up in the water. We want to stop that. And we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that, and I'm hoping that we can start seeing the difference. So when we talk about risk-based approach, for us to get back to the question, is back to what are the consequences across the state for closing a certain facility. It's huge. So for us, we're always trying to look at the best practices to give us the longest lasting solution. Because if we don't, and if I have to close, I could save quite a bit of money, but if I have to go back to that same location 2 or 3 times because I didn't fix it right the first time, I've lost. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
No, that's really good. And obviously, as a supplier of products, we're all for open competition, big time. We think performance-based specs and open competition, especially now with the way that supply chains are what they are. And with that, I'm going to ask this question, Eliza Jane, I'm going to ask you this. Our industry has historically been really slow to change. And with extreme weather events becoming more frequent and more severe, how do you think as an industry, I mean, we've talked a lot about sharing ideas, we've talked about working with communities that are next door to us. How do you think we better address this risk? What changes or innovations would you like to see within stormwater management, infrastructure management?
As the Director of Public Works in a smaller city, learning from, say, LA County, City of Los Angeles, others that have already gone through the process, we don't have the resources, we don't have the personnel to do that same type of research, that same kind of analysis. So I would like to see more collaboration at the smaller scale. So where the larger entities perhaps reach out to communities, cities such as myself, because to me that's really helpful. That actually can help us move along. If another large city or county has actually done an analysis, or even say Caltrans, on different types of products, we would never have the resources to do that. But if that could be part of business as usual to share that information, and even have them make an effort specific to certain cities, like that's just part of their business, that would be really helpful. Because to me, that's where we then share information and then we can progress collectively in the region.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask this question now. I'm going to go to Josette. I'm going to ask you a question about, because we're in the bonus phase right now. We've gone through our questions. So this is the random phase where I can ask any question and just sort of see how good you are on your toes. But one of the things we've talked about is sources of funding. Obviously, the infrastructure bill is a good source of funding, but when you think about funding and infrastructure, in your experience, state funding, bond funding, federal funding, how do you guys look at funding in the city of Beverly Hills?
Very good question. I mean, even though we are Beverly Hills and we're stereotypically have a lot of money, which but with the compliance level and the millions to billions of dollars, I mean, we don't have that capital to do it. So we have been really aggressive in doing, applying for state grant funds, local grant funds, and like you mentioned before with our partnership with Culver City is what we're trying to do is kind of setting the example, using these regulations to kind of connect us cities together, our neighboring cities together, to put our resources together and make a better quality of life for the region. I think for us right now is more of that, exposure. Stormwater is not a, handsome or good-looking infrastructure, not like water, but it has to be, given more attention. And by broadcasting the benefits, the multi-benefits of it, I think we will get more support and kind of change the rules of the game in terms of funding. Like, for example, stormwater is not considered a utility in the state of California. You have to go through Prop 218 processes, which is such a deterrent for small cities like Eliza and I to go through the ballot and ask our residents to vote for it. That's just not always going to be a winning thing. But fortunately for here in LA County, we're able to pass Measure W. That is a parcel tax on our residents here, but 95% of what's being collected is being given back to the watersheds, the cities, to invest on stormwater stormwater projects. So that's just one thing, but I think now we're looking in terms of regions, kind of integrating and looking at this as a regional approach and as an individual city goals.
Yeah, stormwater is certainly not sexy from a product category perspective, and you're right. I mean, I think probably everybody in the room when they hear Beverly Hills thinks you guys should have tons of money, and you should be able to get as much money as you need to do that. But as you mentioned, of course, there's competing things out there. So Rajani, we're going to ask you a question around checks and balances that you guys have in place up there around when you build resilient or sustainable infrastructure systems that are designed to be installed. We've talked about low impact design. We've talked about green infrastructure. What do you guys think about from a check and balance perspective around, I've got a problem, I can solve it by doing X, put a lot of concrete and pipe in place, or I can look at green infrastructure, lifestyle. What do you guys use from an internal checks and balance perspective? Internal process, going and talking to the residents of the areas where you work. What's best practice that you guys use?
It's a combination of everything. I mean, and I did want to just add, our nonprofit agencies or organizations that are out there, they've been so instrumental in just kind of helping us really understand. Because in many of these communities, particularly in our underserved areas, it's trust. It comes down to, and they also want to do good for their community or for their neighborhood, and so right now there's just a whole host of things that we have to do. Just having food available, having broadband. I mean, these are really fundamental things that we're prioritizing. But as overseeing the watershed, we need to also think about our space and how are we utilizing it. So there's a lot of competing interests with our partner departments, given the political climate of things that are going on. But right now it's we are focused on through what is in our stormwater permit, whatever that is pertaining to water quality benefits, so there's more bang for our buck. Because these things are not they're very costly. And also, I did want to piggyback, we, again, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Santa Clara County, it's about 1.9 million people, and San Jose is about 1.1 million. So we have the lion's share, of the county. And so what we have done, at least to help our little cities, little like Cupertino, if they house Apple, so, or Sunnyvale, if you know those towns. These towns don't have staff, to, do. So we do leverage, some of the assets that we have and, help support, just a lot of the research that we've done. Overall. And so that's another thing that we have to think about in prioritization is what could be the common benefit for the county, in our consideration. So, and again, we're also looking at where we can partner with our other agencies, so Valley Water is one of our local flood agencies and water supplier. So where can we do joint efforts, and so it is kind of like a prioritization scheme, but where is it that we can maximize that can benefit our community? And so, but one dream that I would love, I'm not sure, we did have a bigger house here, but it sounded like they were all in transportation. I think just partnering with other funding sources to also include stormwater is really critical. I know that a lot of these grants in transportation fields are very restrictive as to thinking about green infrastructure or other stormwater measures. And so if those are at a federal level, those policy changes can, I think we can really spread the wealth a little bit more. So, but that's a dream, one day.
You did mention not-for-profits, though. Do you actively work with not-for-profits on projects?
Oh, my God. Do you know the Bay Area?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if they're big here, but they keep us in check. So they're our lifeline right now. Given the restrictions, like Gisette, I'm sorry, I called you Sergio. So that's okay, Sergio, you got credit. Anyway. They've been just so instrumental in just kind of keeping the community alive and, and just being engaged with nature, because the pandemic really, just prohibited that, right? And so that they have been our lifeline. So definitely encourage, for those of you who are in agencies, to really think about who are your nonprofits that know these communities very well so that you can use them as a partnership. And some of the grants do go to them. So that's another opportunity. So
yeah, definitely looking at sourcing for funding and then looking at not-for-profits, especially if it's restoration projects. I mean, there's a lot of not-for-profits looking at different restoration and returning or giving people access to that watershed, water areas, clean water that they didn't necessarily have in the past. We do have about 5 minutes left. I wonder is there any questions from anyone in the audience? I'll give you a moment if anyone's got any questions for any of these esteemed panelists on the stage. Over here.
There was mention of even stormwater improvements for sidewalk projects. I don't remember who mentioned it, but if you could talk a little bit about that. Is it new sidewalk or sidewalk?
That was me, Joseph, from Beverly Hills. So it's sidewalk replacement. In Beverly Hills we have trees with our sidewalks. So ficus, very lovely, and so they've done their damage. It's not good to just kind of lay over an old sidewalk, repair a sidewalk. So what we're doing is putting tree wells and then planting new trees. So we're integrating both our street tree master plan, urban forest management plan with our sidewalk replacement plan. So underneath those trees, we have stormwater quality filters underneath those things that would manage the runoff on the curb and gutter portion, but also help with the irrigation portion of the trees.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, great panel. My question is, do you reuse the stormwater? That's one. And then two, what's the funding and the budgets that you're working with as far as your capital programs?
So the regional facility that we're going to be building, we're actually piloting an opportunity to tie that into our recycled water system. So, but it goes through the filtration process. So because it's not quite meeting the regulations for drinking water, but there are lots of opportunities for us to recharge our groundwater. So from that's what we're definitely moving in that direction. Budget-wise, so my program is about $21 million. That obviously is nothing with regards to building these mega infrastructures that we have to do. So we're heavily reliant on on grants and measures if they're successful. Just like Josette said, we are heavily regulated by, or it's under Prop 218, so that's part of the requirements is it needs 75% of the voter approval, which, again, something you don't see. How do you vote on it, right? It's one of those challenges, but yeah, that's what we deal with.
And then Eliza Jane mentioned that they're using active stormwater management, so.
Right, and one of the things we do by having it go to the wastewater treatment plant, they're not only producing recycled water and infiltrating it also into the ground, but Metropolitan Water District is building their huge, largest in the world type system for turning that into potable water so that we can decrease our demand for 5 states off of the Colorado River. And that's all in Carson, so we're pretty excited.
Yeah, that's definitely not normal, right?
Right.
Most stormwater, when we talk about stormwater solutions, they're passive, and most times they end up back into a lake, river, or stream. Anyone using stormwater for either an active management for gray water, using it for irrigation, using it for flushing of toilets, that's very rare. But I would imagine, probably if we look forward into the future, that's definitely something that we get asked for more. If you start thinking about water scarcity, especially in the west part of the U.S., I would imagine that you're going to start to see things like that become much, much more popular, much more frequent. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank each of you on the stage for providing some great commentary. Thank you all for paying attention to us for 45 minutes, and we'll see you later.